Throughout Kings Island's 50-plus year history, there have been a lot of innovative new rides. The original Bat, well, that was one of them. I'm Ryan Surr, along with Kings Island superstar Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast for Kings Island fans by Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
All right, so the original Bat, I never got to ride it. I was like one when they tore it down, I think. Um, so when was it announced in the media, and how did the park create excitement about it?
Well, it was a lot different back then than it is today. Now you see a lot of these new capital announcements happening in August, right before season passes for the next year go on sale. But this was announced at the end of October. It was October 29th
Mhm.
in 1980. And to build excitement, the park had a Victorian style mansion as the ride's pre-built station for this announcement, complete with the sculpted bat heads on the front of the coaster car. So they had that parked on a piece of track inside the station, and they had these characters walking around. They had Dracula, they had Frankenstein, and they had the bat himself. So it was, pretty big spectacle, but it was a big deal. Um, they were coming off announcing the Beast in 1979, and this was just another one of those innovative first.
Yeah. So what made the original Bat so unique, so groundbreaking?
Well, it was the world's first true suspended roller coaster. It was designed by Aero Development, and what made this prototype ride unique was its ability to swing riders underneath the track. So before this, everybody rode on, the top of the track, but this one you rode underneath, and it was unpredictable with the uncontrolled swinging. That's what made it unique. And the cars, they were able to swing up to 90 degrees, and it was really an innovative thrill ride for its time.
Yeah. So construction was going on during the summer of 1980. I'm sure you saw it, but how much did you know was going on? Like, what did you know
Not a
about
whole
it?
lot. Yeah, not a whole lot. It was 1980. I had yet to be a pass holder. I went a couple of times. It was there, like middle, late June of 1980, and they had the area cleared out. It had been a lot of trees and everything before that, so it was kind of all leveled out, and you could see, construction starting on a station, and they had a sign up, that kind of indicated that a new attraction was coming. So that was kind of the teaser, campaign. I came back late August. It was August 24th. I do remember that date exactly. It was a couple of days before I started my senior year of high school. So some of the structure by that time was up. Part of the station was built. The teaser sign, said another terrifying creature, was about to escape. So that really started to, garner my interest about what this might be. I had no idea it was going to be a suspended coaster, though. Now, back then, there wasn't social media. There weren't fan sites like KI Central. There was no other way to find out what was going on at the park unless you read it in the newspaper or saw it on one of the local television stations.
Did they have to kind of explain what a suspended coaster was, or like they gave you the visual? Because nobody has seen anything like this before, right?
No, when they announced it, they had the renderings and that about what it was going to be, hanging from the track, and that's what made it unique, and that's what everybody was talking about, like how's that going to work? And then it looked really cool, with the swinging and everything, what it was going to do, and it was, when you wrote it, it was, a fantastic ride. It just didn't work.
Yeah, yeah, it did not work. I've heard it was a great ride, but so when did it begin its test cycles and begin to open to the public?
Very late in the game, it began its initial test cycles with the trains. It was April 4th, 1981. It opened to the public April 26th of 81, which was opening day that year. And there was some initial testing that happened like in January of that year. They used wooden crates. A friend of mine had a video of it, and I remember, I had a chance to watch this, but you saw it going up the lift and swinging violently, and by the time the train, came back into the station, all these crates were just destroyed. And you hear voices, some of the words they were using and stuff we can't use on our podcast here, but I think that's when they knew then in January that they were going to have some problems with this.
Yeah, yeah, I could. I that's an anecdote that I've heard before too, where they, I mean, at the time they didn't have the computer simulation for the clearances. I think is the terminology they use for that sort of stuff. But the crates came back damaged and destroyed. So thank goodness no one was on it.
Yeah, yeah. But I did get to see that video, and it still exists somewhere, out there. It was on a VHS tape, and it was just fascinating to see. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, and it was just really cool to watch.
Yeah. So Yeah, the yeah, you're kind of known for, you know, keeping track of everything. Like, you can tell me how many pieces of pizza you ate in 1983, or anything like that. Um, how many times did you ride the bat? Tell me you know.
I rode the bat 49 times. My first ride was June 15th of 1981. My last ride came in 1983, so 49 times. My first ride, I waited in a line that started back to where, if you're in Coney Mall, where Skyline Chili is now.
Wow.
So went all the way down into the bat station, and then they had a queue at the bottom, and you came up to the top. So it was about an hour and 30 minutes of wait time. It went down a couple times during that period, but 49 times. Now I was in line to ride it my 50th time, and these two girls asked me if they could go in front of me so they could ride with their friends. Well, being the nice guy that I am, I said, no problem. So they were probably, 18, 19 years old, around the same age I was. So I was like, no problem, go ahead. So they get in the train, it goes up the lift. The other train comes in, they unload, they send it out empty. So that by the time the other one comes back in that they're on, they send it out empty again. And then they just kind of come over the PA system like they did so often. They just said, the bat is experiencing a temporary mechanical issue. You're welcome to stay in the station, or you can come back later. Whatever. And it was just standard operating procedure that happened all the time. I didn't think anything of it.
Mhm.
But those girls were on the last ever cycle
Yeah.
of the bat. It never ran again with park guests. So I could have been on the last ride if I hadn't been a nice guy.
Yeah, nice guys finish last. I think Jim Carrey told us that in one of his movies. Do you remember your last ride, though? Your actual last ride?
My actual last ride on it, I don't. I just remember the first one, but you never think it's going to be your last one, so it's not as memorable.
Yeah, this ride could be your last. That's a marketing campaign. Write that down.
It should be, yeah, but I know, but it was, it wasn't until like the next year when I realized it was never going to run again that you start to think back, oh, I could have been on that very last train. Now there was, times where you thought it might be reopened. The park was hopeful, but it just never happened.
Yeah, so I don't think it was one of the situations where when it broke down that time, that was when the decision was made. It was made several attempts later to fix it, and it just um it was just beyond it was beyond repair. Can you think of any other interesting stories that you encountered with the bat?
Yeah, because of the abundance of downtime that it had after the ride had closed, never reopened again. Um, they did one cycle with it one time just to do a stress test.
Mhm.
So they sent it around. I'm over at the beast with Carl Eichelman, and we see it and we hear it. You could hear the bat going up the lift hill from the parking lot. I mean, it was probably the loudest ride going up the lift that I've ever heard. But Carl and I were in line, so Carl just decides. He just says, "Hey, the bat's going to be opening today at 3 o'clock. Don, we got to make sure we're at the bat at 3 o'clock." And he kept talking as we're going through the queue. "Hey, Don, just remember we got to be at the bat at 3 o'clock. It's going to reopen." Well, as it got to be around 2:30, 2:40, there's like 500 people in line for the bat.
Oh, no.
So that was one of the funniest things for us to come walking. We were going to get some pizza at the La Rosa's there in Rivertown, and we see all the people lined up. We go out there, and then there's security, and we go, "Oh, that's not opening. Where'd you get that?" Everything like that. So that was one of the funnier things, was just to see how people in line would hear that and then head over there to get in line for something that wasn't even going to open.
Yeah, so the bat you mentioned it only operated, for 2 seasons, right?
Well, parts of three, part of 83.
Okay, but it was, I think they said 100 operating days total. It was some good round number like that, I think. Um, so for those who don't know, what was the reason? Like, what was the big underlying problem with the bat that led to its removal so quickly, so young?
Now, the bat had design flaws. It had all these things that made it mechanically difficult to operate consistently. They were always experimenting, trying to um, control the swing of the cars and that. And when I first rode it, I mean, those things were swinging up like 90 degrees, almost parallel to the track. And you know how heavy those cars are when they come, slamming back down from swinging up and that. So it put a lot of stress on the track. They didn't bank the track at all around turns and things. So that was putting a lot of stress on it. It had problems engaging on the second lift hill. A lot of times it would hit that bottom of the chain and it would jam up right there because it was swinging as it was coming in. So just a lot of mechanical issues, and you know closed after the '83 season. It never operated again, and it wasn't until early 1985 when it was demolished.
So it was SPNO for the entire 1984 season?
Yeah, it
Wow.
was there. Yeah, I have pictures of it just, standing but not operating.
So how did the park communicate this that I mean, how did they convey that message? Obviously, you've got experience with that, with the whole Son of Beast thing where it was SPNO for a couple of years. Um,
Now, where do you think I got no decision has been made?
mm.
So so, yeah, I heard that so many times, "Is the back gonna run? No decision has been made. Is the back gonna operate this year? No decision has been made." So, and there hadn't been a decision. I mean, they didn't know. There was
Right.
never
They tried a lot of
there was
stuff,
hope.
right?
Yeah, it was just like Son of Beast. I mean, you're always hopeful that you could, find a solve for it. It just never happened.
Yeah, so just to break it down a little bit more, my understanding, and obviously, please correct me if I'm wrong, but so ultimately, the design flaw was that they didn't bank the turns. So because of the fact that they didn't bank the turns, it caused a lot of stress on the track and was causing fractures in the track, which would be very expensive to repair repeatedly and probably not entirely safe to repair repeatedly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but you're running up to, like, there were times, like, these shocks on the cars, it started, like, with 1,
Mhm.
and then it had, like, 2, then, like, they were sending people to, like, Smythe Auto up the road every day to get more, the mechanics and things, and then they had, like, 6, 8 of them on the car. So if you see pictures, you see more and more shocks on these cars as the history of the ride, went from the opening of it in 1981 till its ending in 1983.
Yeah.
So there's so many ways they were trying to slow it down
Mhm.
or, limit the swing, and just nothing worked.
Yeah, it's, if I remember correctly, one of the interviews that Evan Poonstengel had in his book, his, History of Kings Island book, the anecdote they said was they kept on sending somebody up to Van Loonen's of all places to buy more.
Yeah, Van Loonen's,
Yeah.
yeah, Smythe Auto, all those places like that. Yeah, exactly, and that was a true story. They were doing that.
Yeah, so the other problem associated with the track not being banked was that the cars would swing uncontrollably, it would mess up the shocks, as often as maybe twice in one day, I've heard the shocks had to be replaced
Mhm.
sometimes, you know?
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess if it's running hot, that would happen. Um
Yeah, but if it was running and you saw it, you heard it going up the lift hill for the test runs, you left whatever ride you were at to get in line for it because, if you weren't on it within the first hour or 2, you might not get on it because you knew it was gonna go down again.
Yeah. What do you think was the lasting impact of the bat? What's its legacy?
Well, I think, I would say the legacy lives on in the form of other suspended coasters. You had Big Bad Wolf at Busch Gardens, Virginia. That ride was immensely popular when it operated there. Iron Dragon at Cedar Point opened in 1987, still going strong there. One of my favorite rides at Cedar Point. You had Top Gun at Kings Island, which is been there since 1993. Now it's called the Bat. So that ride has lasted 30 years. So they were able to use that and improve on the flaws that the original Bat had. So it did contribute to the history of the suspended coasters because they were able, nothing was totally useless. You could always learn from it, and
Mhm.
that's what they did with the Bat. And they were able to make these other suspended coasters at other parks.
Yeah, speaking from a scientific standpoint, the bat did not fail. The bat taught them how not to build a suspended coaster. And there are some great ones out there. I love like the new bat at Kings Island, formerly Top Gun, formerly Flight Deck. Such an underrated ride. Boy, do I love that
Yeah,
ride. It's
yeah.
relentless. Iron Dragon at Cedar Point, not as good of a ride, but still like I mean, that's like a for a family ride kinda that's a B plus ride, you know?
Yeah. Now of all the suspended coasters out there, and I got a chance to ride them all,
Mhm.
the Bat was the best
The original bat.
when it worked. Yeah, the original Bat off the second lift, and then you went around the turns, and they had, there were trees and everything around it. I mean, it was, it was only going like 35 miles an hour, but it seemed a lot faster. It was a really wild ride, especially that second half of it. Far and away the best. I did like the drop at Busch Gardens with Big Bad Wolf. When you dropped and you had the water and everything right there, and you made that turn. But the rest of the ride, wasn't nearly as good as the Bat was.
Yeah, it's funny because with Big Bad Wolf, I never got to ride it, but, because I was kind of early in my, coastering at that point. I didn't go to Busch Gardens until that Busch Gardens until last year, but, so many famous photos of the Big Bad Wolf coming down that turn and stuff, and now Verbolten does that exact same maneuver using the same footings or footers, whatever the
Same
word is,
footers and everything. Yeah,
and,
exactly.
I felt like I'd been there before just by looking at it and having seen photos of Big Bad Wolf doing the same thing, so yeah, so rest in
Yeah, it
peace,
was
Pat.
one of my favorite rides. I loved it. I loved it, and I think what it did is, Even though it didn't work, the bat reaffirmed Kings Island's reputation as a leader in innovative thrill ride concepts.
Yeah, I wish I had gotten to if I could go back in time and ride one ride that Kings Island had that I never had the opportunity to ride, that would certainly be it, you know?
Yeah, I think about it a lot.
Yeah. All right. So, cool. Yeah. So, rest in peace, the bad. Thanks for the contribution you made. Because we got some great rides out of your legacy. But let's move along to the Tower Topics X question. And this is from Tower underscore Topics, our X/Twitter account. This is coming from Rich Linville. This is a question for you, Don. At Don Helbig. You were involved in KI for decades, including a long run working there in PR. With your new blog, if Camp Snoopy misses the mark or something goes wrong, do you think you could write those stories with KI in your blood? Good question.
It's a great question. Absolutely. I think, once you're not there and you go on to something else, you have to kind of look at everything objectively. As somebody now with the Theme Parks by Don blog, I work for my audience and I'm obligated to tell them the story as it is, not how someone else might want me to paint the picture, but as it is. So I think from a credibility standpoint, I'd have to. Now, at the same time, that's if something just isn't, great or not what it's supposed to be, whatever it might be, just something falls a little bit short. Yeah, I could do that. At the same time, I'm not going to go on a witch hunt. I'm not going to be looking for those negative news stories. I'm not going to be writing stories about, ride got stuck on a lift hill for 5 minutes or anything like that. Um, no, I'm not going to be doing those kind of stories. You won't find that on my blog. But if something, they open something up and, it just comes out a little bit flat or something, yeah, I have to write that because I owe that to my audience.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's two sides of the coin when it comes to this stuff, and I've noticed this from being doing the KIC thing, being the counter to you as the PR person, and doing the PR stuff for contracted stuff, where I PR attempts to form the narrative, the journalists take the narrative and write the story. So you're on the other side of the coin now. They write
Hmm.
the narrative. Camp Snoopy is going to be this, this, and this, and so you know what to expect, and then you come in and you write what you see. Now, with that being said, with Planet Subi particularly, if it comes out anything like the concept art, you're probably not gonna have a problem writing glowing things because
Oh,
it
not
looks
not at
awesome,
all
you
with that.
know?
No, the way I would compare it is, when you had, Troy Aikman was a Hall of Fame quarterback with the Dallas Cowboys. They won 3 Super Bowls with him as the quarterback. Well, he retires and he becomes an analyst with Fox Sports. He's assigned to do a Cowboys game. Well, it's no longer we, it's them. So he has to be objective about it, or he doesn't have credibility with the audience. And that's the same way it is with me now with Theme Parks by Don.
Yeah, but on the flip side, when was the last time that Boomer didn't pick the Bengals?
You're right. You're right. But no, no, like I said, but I'm not going to be somebody I'm not going to try to break their news. I'm not going to try to, look for things that's not going to be my style. The other outlets net, they can all write the first stories and everything. My goal is to take the information that's out there. And if I'm not first, I'm not going to try. I might be 100th out there with the story, but I'm going to try to do it better. And that's what my objective is going to be.
Well, it's coming from an interesting perspective. Somebody that was very involved in the industry and then worked in the industry and now is involved in the industry in a new way with the podcast and stuff. So I think your perspective is pretty valuable. It's you got to be unbiased. You got to make decisions, and it's kind of like it would be difficult to write a negative story about let's say Holiday World because the people that run the park are just so nice, but that's the price you pay. If you're gonna be like, have honest journalism and, like, let's say, Good Gravy misses the mark, that you have to say that. You can't just say, "Oh, it's awesome," because then you lose credibility that way, but, yeah, great question, Rich. Thanks for,
Yeah, you do, and you're right. I mean, the only way as a journalist you can have credit, by just being objective and just writing what you see yourself.
awesome, cool. Well, thanks again, Rich, for the question. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.